Was everybody doing? If you guys are just watching, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. If you are watching tomorrow or the week later or not watching at all, still, thank you. Welcome to what we call the pregame. It's not much of a pregame. We're not tailgating and drinking and having a good old time or nothing like that. We are having a good time, which is a difference than, the other stuff. But we're having a good time to also sit back and remember something as well. Um, Today marks the 158th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg of July 1st, 1863. Now, today, I unfortunately was not able to be on the field for any of the anniversary videos I have planned to do. So I figured instead of going around and doing recaps tomorrow on day one, that I would just do a brief, some of my favorite stuff I've seen on the battlefield, particularly the first battle, the first day. Going out there towards McPherson Ridge and Herbst Woods, Oak Ridge, Oak Hill, Iverson's attack location, the line that Stone and Cutler are going to meet that attack on. Like there's so many places that I could like really just do all these videos for when it comes to the first day's battlefield. However, I don't think that does justice to what I want to do tomorrow. With a lot of personal connections that I have to the Battle of Gettysburg, all take place on July 2nd. And arguably even into July 3rd. I'm not going to be there for the 3rd either, so I'm either going to do one or two things because I really don't want to get ahead of myself and say I'm going to do something, and then unfortunately with time being the way time is, that not playing out. So the goal tomorrow is initially to create content on the second day. To specifically zero in our focus, it's more so going to be in the areas of either the peach orchard, or we're going to really try to focus in on the wheat field. If I can do both, fantastic. That's awesome. If not, understandable. The possibility that I want to throw out is doing something on Pickett's Charge or the artillery at Pickett's Charge, because I'm sure many of you are familiar already with both. They're both very popular stories and very popular happenings that do take place at the end of the Battle of Gettysburg. But I think at the same time that there are some new things to be talked about and discussed. And again, it does touch on that personal connection to Gettysburg that I have. So at the same time, I do believe that that might be beneficial for not only myself to be able to share, but also to hear the story on this and, add that human interest that I really love to throw out there. So that's the agenda for tomorrow. Nothing too crazy, nothing too out there. Very excited to be going again with Cameron. Like, he's been wonderful to be able to go to Gettysburg with. I'm going to meet up with the tattooed historian again at some point, hopefully on the battlefield tomorrow. Look out for that. Maybe something will come of it. Check it out. Just keep watching. I'm excited to see him again. He's become quite a good friend, and I really cannot appreciate him enough. And the fact that there's a week, 2 weeks in a row, Friday and Friday, that I get to go up and see a good buddy of mine, that always adds to the draw of going to Gettysburg, if you know what I mean. Um, and then even bringing new people along. A colleague of mine from work is going to come and join us too. So we have a crowd that we're drawing in. It's cool to be able to see this expand and this new Gettysburg to me, because I'm going with, some of the times I've gone in the past. Granted, at the time they were great, they were awesome, but they weren't the Gettysburg that Gettysburg is, if that makes sense. Those were times that I wasn't able to really appreciate the battlefield or appreciate even the time that I had there. At the time I thought I did. Again, it was different. At the point I had my head in a much different place than it is today, and goals are a little bit different today as well. Um, Going now and knowing what I know about that battlefield and having the time that I am and the new experiences that I'm able to create there, and it's felt like an entirely new experience for me. And again, I got bit by the bug twice, technically three times, because I've been out of a Hershey Park trip. I went with my folks way back in early 2000s, way back, like that's not 20 years ago. I had an opportunity to go to Gettysburg with my father and my mother, and I think it was there that I was bit with the physical bug, because that was my first physical visit to Gettysburg. My father had previously given me a few VHS tapes, so he saw that I liked something. I remember watching the Civil War combat air on TV, and I think it was an episode of either Little Round Top. Yeah, I think it was Little Round Top. And he saw that I had liked that so much. And of course, at this time when VHS is still very popular, you could call into the TV station and order your seasons on VHS. So I think this is even before DVD really made its boom onto the field. I'm sure it was around, but I don't think any households have all had DVDs at this point. And I remember some point after that, again, this is 2000s, this was the mail. I mean, it's crazy. Everything just changes that quick. He had ordered them, and they showed up, and there was a collection of episodes. The biggest one I can remember being the Round Top at Gettysburg, because I remember going to the battlefield about 2, maybe 3 years later with them, old visitor center and all. And I mean, Howard Johnson was still standing, so it was still a different Gettysburg then. And I went for I want to say, like, I call it my first time, when I was an intern at the Park Service in 2016. And when I went, I was able to, I can't even find the words for it. And I've told John this many times, well, not many times, but the last time I was at Gettysburg with him, I mentioned to him, I was like, when we're standing on Oak Hill and we're looking out at these fields that are in front of us that have been preserved very well and have almost the same view as the soldiers had. So, the replication of 1863 right there. Minus the buses and the cars and the blah, blah, blah. But I had a map book with me at the time, and it was the Maps of Gettysburg by Bradley Gottfried. That was the map book that I had at the time. And I took that to Oak Hill, and another colleague from the park, Eric, was the one that I went with, actually. So We were really there to see those two Whitworths. Kind of kidding, kind of not, but those were like a huge draw for me, artillery, as you most know. But we went and visited those Whitworths, and that was where he recommended that I flip the map a little bit that I had bought and kind of visualize Gettysburg that way. And as I call it, the light bulb moment really hit in that parking lot. So I read a book on Gettysburg by Stephen Sears in preparation for this trip so that I had some back knowledge going into it, because I really had my focus on Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Chancellorsville, and Wilderness. Even still today, that always will draw number one absolute focus. But there's this love of Gettysburg that always tends to pull at my heartstrings and push me back to gravitating and studying Gettysburg in some way, shape, or form, or even if it's just to give it that love it is. And most call it our mecca, or call it our big place to go, and it's like the one place all Civil War folks meet up. It has become absolutely more than that. I don't even look at it anywhere near as a mecca. There are different things about Gettysburg that really draw me again when it comes to now the individual people that today, friends that live there. The vistas, the views that you get in those sunsets are absolutely unique, and I don't think I will ever be able to replicate what I can see at Gettysburg, even with the photos that I take. That unless you have watched that sunset at the angle, looking out across those fields, and specifically from the Union perspective, like if you're over there on the Federal side of the battlefield where the angle and all those monuments are, we call them, for folks that haven't been there, just trying to describe as best as I could in layman's terms. But at the same time, it's just this like beautiful sunset. And that was really what drew me to wanting to understand and know the battle more, is because before that, I wasn't necessarily always appreciative of things like that. Small things like sunsets were something I wouldn't even bat an eye to. In fact, I wouldn't even participate in watching one. But I witnessed one there, and that exponentially changed my outlook on natural life. And some of the moments that you can really appreciate, because there's a lack of that, I think. At least at the time, I had a complete lack of that, and I didn't appreciate the natural things life can give you. It's overwhelming, it's surreal, it's great, and I highly encourage a trip to the angle to watch a sunset, if ever possible, and finish strong with a Dobbin House dinner and make that a good memory, because that Dobbin House place is incredible. And I haven't been back in a while, and I don't plan to, unless it's a really special occasion, mainly because of the price there. And there are so many books and other things that need to be bought. But that's a definite, like, really unique experience too. If you can end your day at the Dobbin House and there's good drinks, there's good food, everything is awesome. I typically like to go get a cigar and a beer, and that was my Gettysburg experience. Is just to go down to the Circle, go to Blue and Gray, go to that pub, pop over to the Union Cigar and pick up a cigar and walk just the town through the night with a cigar, or sit and relax and really enjoy the modern Gettysburg, because that's also a very very big draw for me to come up there. But it's the battle too. So while I'm having all this, it looks like fun. There's not a joyous atmosphere the entire time. I don't do this to party or to have fun, or it's a reverence thing. Okay, it's different because it's not the going and mourning, and there's a celebration that this country as a whole and this battlefield played a major impact, a major role in the causing this country to not be divided north and south, Union and Confederate. And it also gives Meade this proper place. I love Meade. I think he's one of the greatest commanders, and I regret not ever picking up on that earlier on. And I really do think that it's awesome to go to a place where you can make it all about Meade. And even hell, if we're talking about it, Dan Sickles too. Because I do have a newfound appreciation for Sickles myself. I'm not going to go in and, have some come to Jesus moment with Sheridan yet. We still have some stuff that I need to work out before I start really liking Sheridan. Halleck's completely out of the question. Hell can freeze over and I'll still flute Halleck out. But the development of me absolutely not being able to stand the scoundrel Dan Sickles, to understanding some more of maybe what went through his mind exactly to cause that move forward on July 2nd. But I'm going to stop talking about that because that's tomorrow. On the ground, where he moves. Well, let's bring it to July 1st. So in 1863, we know that at Chancellorsville, Virginia, it's just outside of Fredericksburg, 13 miles due west if you're heading on what today would be the Route 3, or the Plank Road, not the Route 3. Route 3, the Plank Road. Hooker is going to maneuver around Lee by using the Rappahannock River. So he's actually going to be on the opposite side of the Rappahannock due to the Battle of Fredericksburg that took place in December of 1862. Leading into April of 1863, Hooker is now in command of the Union Army, taking that from a defeated and just off the cuff of a failed march around the Army Burnside. Hooker is going to be in command of the Army of the Potomac, launch a large flank around Lee's army via the Rappahannock and Rapidan rivers, cross at a place known as Ely's Ford and a few other fords along the way, not going to get bogged down too much into Chancellorsville, and inserts himself behind Lee, thinking he stole one and thinking that he had the upper hand. Clash on May 1st will say otherwise because Hooker, quote unquote, loses faith in Joe Hooker. Okay, first of all, I love that he actually says that because a lot of the Civil War commanders, specifically Army of the Potomac, do not take accountability for their foul-ups. And some do in later years, but immediately Hooker is owning his mistake, is owning his shortcoming, and owning that loss of faith that he has in himself. And so that he's losing that really shows that he's honest about a lot of what he's saying, even with him being so braggadocious and being such a pompous ass, if you will. He still has this honesty air about him, and I think that does say a lot. Now, I mean, of course, every Civil War general and soldier alike will embellish their own story to make it sound more readable or make it likable, but I think Hooker's doing the right thing. Anyways, Hooker loses faith in Hooker. Jackson launches an attack around the army that's the largest. It's a flank march. He launches a flank march on the 11th Corps of the Union Army. The 11th Corps gloriously flies, runs all the way into Union lines back at the Chancellor Clearing, Chancellor House, and Jackson is wounded by his own troops in result because of a fatal night assault plan. It was a reconnaissance, so there was not actually an assault launched, but there were plans to do so. Jackson actually calling that off upon his return, meeting bullets from the 18th or maybe the 21st North Carolina. Who knows? That's always debatable, and I'm not going to throw that out there again. But there's this happening in Virginia, and Jackson ultimately is going to die 10 days later and be a casualty of friendly fire, you would think, but absolutely not. He's dying from pleural pneumonia in the Chandler plantation, an outbuilding of the Chandler plantation at Guinea Station, which is around the Thornburg, Virginia area, if you are familiar. Or if you've been there, they may have been when it was titled the Stonewall Jackson Shrine. Thankfully, it is no longer called the Shrine. It is appropriately the Stonewall Jackson death site, which it should have been to begin with. Long story short, anyways. So at Chancellorsville, we're on May 3rd. So May 2nd was that flank attack, and May 2nd was Jackson's wounding. All of that taking place there. Oh, Chancellorsville on May 3rd is an absolute bloodbath. It's the third bloodiest morning of the United States Civil War, and we'll see a casualty, killed, wounded, missing in action for every second of the battle for the first 5 hours of May 3rd. Chancellorsville ends up being a Confederate victory, Union defeat. Hooker is revered for bringing a morale boost to the Union Army, but not so much for the Chancellorsville. Lincoln screaming in White House or boasting when he reads the news that, my God, what will the country say? And again, from good measure, what will the country say? I'm sure it was extremely more passionate than my display there. But this is a shock. Because you have Hooker setting an expectation that his army is going to do well. And he even gives you the proof in front of him. He gets behind Lee. And writing something like, "The enemy must ingloriously fly," that gives you a bit of confidence, especially to the American people back at home, hearing that the Union Army is now at a vantage point. So, with that being said, obviously there needs to be something done because up until this point in 63, the Confederates, specifically under Robert E. Lee, are doing phenomenally well. Um, Not enough to where I think they were undefeatable, like they said, but they are doing quite well. Fredericksburg is a resounding defeat for the Union Army. The 7 Days campaign, yes, at the end of the day, Lee is able to throw McClellan away from that gate of Richmond that he was so close to. But there's so many things that take place in that. Again, that could be an episode in itself. Having had a lot of victories, though, and the Army of Northern Virginia really making a name for itself, it's going to do a very bold thing, and it's going to invade Pennsylvania. It invaded Maryland previously in 1862, and the result of that was the bloodiest single day in United States history. So invading Pennsylvania is only promising to bring with it just about the same, if not times three, and that's exactly what it's going to bring with it. Lee's going to occupy Pennsylvania. He's going to terrorize citizens, and the orders that Lee writes are actually saying to leave the women alone and don't harass anybody, don't harass the families at home. But let's face it, it's an enemy invading in a wartime situation. No matter what, there's nothing sweet and innocent about an invading army. You are invading a country. You are an enemy in what now is your enemy's country. So there's really not any way. Also, I think looting and sacking and taking everyone's belongings or foodstuffs for your army, it's theft at the end of the day too. You're not sweet and innocent stealing from hungry people who are also ravished by a civil war that is taking the head of household at the time, which would have probably been a father or a husband, out and putting them in a field and slaughtering them. And then you have the people that are slaughtering your family, your husband, your father, coming into your house and taking every single head of cabbage or lettuce you have left. Hey, in my mind, that's not peaceful. So yes, when I say that, I do say it boldly and confidently because it is war. There are circumstances, you can put thousands of circumstances in front of me, but at the end of the day, that doesn't change the fact that this is an invading army. So that's that. Lee is invading Pennsylvania and using Pennsylvania for that very reason of what I mentioned earlier is the vast amount of resources that are virtually untapped. And the Army of Northern Virginia survives off of green corn in Maryland, Southern Maryland, for the Antietam campaign. So much so that they're sick of it. But you're hearing in this point of the war in 62 in Maryland that they're eating something. There's a sustenance because you're finally getting sick of a food. So you're not going hungry. You're going hungry by choice because you can't stomach it anymore. You don't like it. The taste is bad. And there's obviously medical things that are going on here too to play into that. But that's something to note too, is that we do look at an army eating better than it did in Virginia off the corn because it's plentiful. It's here. It hasn't been tapped yet. So Lee, I think, banks off that same idea and goes into Pennsylvania with that in mind, that if he can utilize some of those fields. Now, mind you, he's going in July, so it's a little bit different than going in September where you're in harvest season. Arguably, July could be some harvest season, depending on if they had an Indian summer or what have you the previous year. But I think more so it was a instant need to relieve some pressure off the Confederacy, militarily speaking. Vicksburg is a shit show, so that's going on too down there. And then you also had, and that's in Mississippi, by the way, for those that don't know. Grant's actually in command of the Union Army at Vicksburg, and we'll take that on July 4th. So quite a week ahead during that first week of July for both armies from both countries, specifically the Union Army, the United States. They're going to see some resounding results from two commanders that will ultimately be fighting together on the eastern battlefields. Well, nonetheless, obviously, with Lee being in Pennsylvania, the Union Army had to do something about that. And what they're going to do is a number of things, actually. The first thing is to get Hooker out. Hooker is ordered out 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg takes place, and George Gordon Meade from Pennsylvania is put in command. That is a snafu. And I have never really appreciated the significance of being in command of an army for 3 days before launching and winning, successfully winning, play on words, but successfully having a campaign like Gettysburg play out in your favor. 3 days before the three bloodiest days our country has ever seen. So with Meade in command, and the Confederates catching wind of a significant Union force, obviously with the orders being that Meade is to protect Washington, there's going to be a little bit of an aggressiveness to George Meade and the young Union Army that maybe wasn't seen or exhibited by Lee before. So there's some pickup on that, and Lee will be also still within his goal of trying to sustain the Army of Northern Virginia, which leads them to the town of Gettysburg. If you've ever looked at Gettysburg on a map, it looks like a wagon wheel. And that's because the town has a lot of different types of roadways. I mean, it's like spokes on a wheel. It's literally almost like a wagon wheel. So with these roads going all over and leading into the center of Gettysburg, it's like Fredericksburg sitting halfway between Washington and Richmond. There is bound to be a fight. There's bound to be a fight at Gettysburg if the Confederate Army made it that far north. The roads lead them to it. Not the shoe BS that we hear. There's a rumor about shoes being the main target of Gettysburg. BS. Those darn roads always, always, always play an extremely instrumental fact into how a battle is going to take place, where it's going to take place, how it will shape out, and how it will be used. Gettysburg is exactly that. Also, to make Gettysburg an even better location for a battlefield. Lush farm fields, open fields. You have high ridges and small mountains like Little Round Top, Big Round Top, Culp's Hill, Powers Hill, what have you, Benner's Hill off to the farthest part of the battlefield. You have so many different pieces of terrain that could be defendable, could be awful for defense, could be good for attacking, could be awful for attacking. It's offering it all within a decent, 20, 30-mile radius. So Gettysburg in Adams County, Pennsylvania is it. Obviously, Meade doesn't select Gettysburg right away and rush into attack. There's something called the Pipe Creek Circular, which we could go on and on and on about, but I highly recommend you read Kent Masterson Brown's Meade at Gettysburg, A Study in Command, if you want to know about the Pipe Creek Circular, or watch some of the YouTube stuff that's been put out specifically for the 158th that was done by the American Battlefield Trust. I believe it was Gary Edelman and Tim Smith. I watched that last night. It was pretty darn cool. So, into the Pipe Creek Circular, I definitely refer you to those because it's much more up their expertise alley than mine. Again, I'm not coming out with a bunch of expertise level things anyways. I just want to talk Gettysburg and pregame a little bit with you guys, and that's by talking history and just being here and sharing what tomorrow's going to be about. But with the significance of Gettysburg, like we mentioned, it's now at a point where we're going to see some things develop. General Buford, commanding Union cavalry, is at Gettysburg on July 1st. And at Gettysburg on July 1st, John Buford knows thereabouts where the Confederates are going to be coming from and from the direction of Cashtown. Cashtown is just northwest of Gettysburg, and the troops will make sure they orient themselves to face that. Johnson Pettigrew is going to be the division commander there, or brigadier general, in command of the troops. And what happens there at that point when those Confederate and Union forces meet really set the stage for how this battle is going to play out. So in the early morning of July 1st, Harry Heath is moving down, or Henry Heath. They call him Harry. I'm used to let's go surprise Harry Heath, and many of you probably know where that's from. If you do, awesome. Well, Heath is going to be from Lieutenant A.P. Hill. I'm sure you guys know who Lieutenant General A.P. Hill is. He's in command of the 3rd Corps, and they are on their advance towards Gettysburg. And it is Heath who is going to meet John Buford on the battlefield first. Marcellus Jones, he's a member of the 8th Illinois Cavalry, is credited to have fired the first shot of Gettysburg by resting his weapon on a fence post, split rail fence post, and then firing, whether he hit or not. Nonetheless, that's the credited first shot. Now, that shot's going to spark a few things. So, John Buford's in command of cavalry. Harry Heath has infantry fighting cavalry. Heath is going to move down the road and engage John Buford's troops. And as they're engaging, more Confederates are going to start moving into the Gettysburg area. So now it looks like there is a Confederate concentration on Gettysburg. That field where John Buford and Heath are fighting are going to see some crazy actions take place here when John Reynolds in his First Corps, which is really emergency motion to move up as fast as possible. And when Reynolds arrives, the situation is not a pretty one. So Confederate artillery has dropped trail onto Her Ridge and have started firing into the cavalry troops there on the other side, close to what is the seminary. So the seminary is almost like an Alamo for some of these guys. It's going to be a last place of retreat. It's going to be a capture point for Confederates, but there's so many other obstacles on that first day battlefield. Again, I don't want to dive into it and make this an hour or 2 hour long thing. I just want to get an idea of what's going on the first day. So the seminary and the cavalrymen are all very, very poignant in a lot of Gettysburg memories. Or their images you very well have seen already. But that's it. That's the first day. That's what brings out the first day. There are those iconic images and those iconic, let's set up how this battle is going to play out. And as that's setting it up, you're setting the stage for the next day, the second day and the third day of July, in Gettysburg, and how that's going to play out in history. Because there's also so much to unpack with both days there. Well, Buford's going to fall back because, let's face it, obviously the holding action is very impressive enough as it is. Yes, they have more of an advanced weapon system. They're cavalry. They're not carrying around the 1853 and the musket rifles. They're using Sharps, and the Sharps rifle is amazing. So they're using that. That's an advantage significantly over those Confederate attackers. So the defenders have an advantage in that regard, and also that some of them are dismounted and mounted. You have some people riding on horseback. You have some not. You have some able to be more maneuverable without the horses, some maneuverable in places that the men can't. It's almost like the Union Army has beefed itself up to prepare for this, even though it wasn't a real thought-out prep. Buford's really running the show here. Meade's just making sure that Gettysburg is concentrated on once he finds out how bad the action's going to be. So now Davis of the Confederate Army, Mississippi, 2nd Mississippi. We know a lot of these names. On the Chambersburg Pike, at a place known as McPherson Ridge. So if you're doing a battlefield tour, you very well know the McPherson Barn and McPherson Ridge. It's a very, very popular spot on that battlefield. And there's an unfinished railroad bed that's got cuts, and it runs in ridges almost. Okay, so this railroad cut is a extremely valuable defense and natural defense for any army who can occupy it. Davis sees that, and Davis goes for it. General Archer and his Tennesseans, so this is Confederate, are going to be attacking McPherson, the ridge on McPherson's Ridge. They're going to be attacking McPherson's Ridge and facing some stalwart defenses from the First Corps, specifically the Iron Brigade. In that action, in that time frame, the commander of the First Corps, John Reynolds, is shot and killed and will fall dead on that battlefield at Gettysburg, right in front of the line of sight of the seminary and Seminary Ridge. Willoughby Run is one of the most dominant features that you're going to see on that battlefield, and it's a bloodbath when Archer gets up there. So Meredith is going to be the troops commanding the Union forces that are in front of Archer, and the Iron Brigade obviously being the accompaniment of all of those. And Willoughby Run itself is a very formidable thing to cross. And I've walked all the way down in between McPherson and Barn, what is called the Quarry, and seen McPherson Road. And I've seen it on a dry day, and I've seen it on a very wet day. And let me tell you, if it was anything like I saw, it was almost a torrent. And in places, Rock Creek gets like that too. But that's an obstacle. The woods, the woodlots that are there, the ridges, the undulating terrain that's around all of these sites, that's absolutely an obstacle. So Archer's facing all of this, and eventually Archer's actually captured. He's the first officer in Lee's army to be captured. He was supposedly with the 14th Tennessee, in the lines of the 14th Tennessee, and he was captured by the 2nd Wisconsin. A private who captured him was killed later that day, and his name was Patrick Maloney. He was given a Medal of Honor for the capture of Archer. Archer will die at a prison later on in the war. That's it for him. Now back to that railroad. That railroad cut. We mentioned 1 Wisconsin, the 2nd Wisconsin. Now we're going to talk about the 6th Wisconsin. I'm sure you all know the story of Rufus Dawes in the 6th Wisconsin. Well, the 2nd Mississippi is going to be holding a position into that railroad cut. And in that railroad cut, it's an absolute setup for a murderous fire to be poured out of it into those boys that are attacking. And it's quite an open field for them to be running at before they can actually make contact with the potential success that they end up having, but with the potential to have success. And that's almost a point blank range. So in order to get to that point, they have to cross a gauntlet of fire from their enfilade to their front. Some may be friendly even, but there is just a murderous fire that these Wisconsin troops have to face in order to get to their objective, which is that railroad cut encasing Confederates from the 2nd Mississippi under General Davis. 3 regiments of Union forces are going to face toward that, and they charge into the direction of the railroad cut through an open field. The 6th Wisconsin's American flag went down 3 times along with their battle flag, and it became riddled with bullet. Dawes himself taking the flag into his hand. Having it seized, they kept moving forward. The Union line ended up forming a V shape and smashing into that railroad cut and capturing some of the 2nd Wisconsin or 2nd Mississippi at a very fearful cost. They did achieve and reach their objective. Anywhere between 395 and 415 were lost out of 1,184 of the total 3 regiments that were engaged on the Union side. That's a very heavy casualty to take. These are killed, wounded, and missing. Confederates lost about 500 killed, wounded, missing, and 200 prisoners out of the 1,707 that they had. That's about 1,000 effectives left. Now it's around noon. It's called the noon lull or the midday lull. More Confederates at this point, or by about 12:30 p.m., have now concentrated in the direction of Gettysburg, one of them being Brockenbrough, one of them being Dorsey Pender from Hill's Corps. So A.P. Hill's really bringing his men into this position. They're coming from all over Pennsylvania, from Carlisle, from York, Cashtown, like we mentioned earlier, Chambersburg. Just so many places they're coming from. Jubal Early's approaching on a Harrisburg road. The 11th Corps of the Union Army is arriving on the field, at which they will meet a very nasty fate on day 1. Robert Rhodes is going to move in to attack on a place known as Oak Hill. If you've ever been to Gettysburg, that very tall monument with the Peace Light Memorial, for those that know, that's Oak Hill, along Oak Ridge. Now, Rhodes is going to bring in an attack that is also kind of a very nasty one in regards to Alfred Iverson. Brigadier General George Doles, Edward O'Neill, and Alfred Iverson make it to the field. Iverson is going to attack a very strong Union position. Iverson himself is not going to be leading that attack either. And they get about anywhere between 50 to 100 yards from that Union line when Baxter's men stand up behind a stone wall and launch a volley into the face of the North Carolinian troops that are attacking. 800 casualties out of the 1,350. Bodies fell in perfect alignment, or so it was said that you could walk the line of the casualties and they fell as they stood in a perfect line. And later after the war, that became known as Iverson's Pits because they were buried where they fell. And if you're the ghost people, it's the story of the first phenomena, but I'm not entertaining that. Obviously, them being this close to Baxter's boys, Baxter and his Union troops are going to continuously fire into that position and really run out of ammo. And so they will withdraw about 3 p.m. Then they are replaced by more fresh Union troops. Harry Heath is going to renew an attack around 2:30, 3:30 in the afternoon. After that, we move to Early. The 11th Corps and Jubal Early. Ewell's division, which is under Jubal Early at the time, his 2nd Division under Jubal Early. They swept down into the Harrisburg Road and will launch an attack towards the almshouse, which was a poorhouse for Gettysburg. Carl Schimmelfennig's division. I do believe his name's Carl. If I said that wrong, please correct me. They will get clobbered by that assault. 157 New York completely surrounded and cut off. Took about 307 casualties that day. The seminary will end up being overrun with Confederates. And the town itself overrun by Confederate forces, bringing the 1st of July to a close. July 1st closes. Confederates have control of the town of Gettysburg and continue to concentrate their forces, eventually bringing up James Longstreet and others. The Union Army doing the same. They are now bringing Union troops en masse to Gettysburg or the surrounding outlying areas in the hills around Gettysburg to prepare to defend the town, or hopefully defend the town, against a Confederate attack that is expected to come the next day, July 2nd, 1863. So that is my spiel today, just on July 1st. I hope it was just a good narrative or a good, just quick, refresher. It was no, thought out thesis or dissertation by any means. It was just the best thing I could possibly think of at the moment to really just fill in the gap of July 1st. And I plan to go much more in depth when it comes to July 2nd, because we'll actually be on the field and utilizing some resources in order to bring this story to life, have the visual aids, have those things that we like to represent the understanding of a battlefield. The topography is incredibly important to understanding a battlefield, and though it might not be the same seeing it through the lens of a camera, the idea is still there. It's a little bit different than me and you just talking and not being able to really be on the field, seeing what we're talking about. So with that said, I'm going to get us ready to close tonight with just a review of what I'm bringing with me to Gettysburg tomorrow to use as resources, because I really am appreciative of the stuff that we have. If I didn't care for them, I love them to death. I really do. So they're not leaving. The Bachata papers are staying here. Without a doubt. Not coming with me. Anything I need to do with those will be done in my room, in my office. That's it. Peach Orchard by Sickles, excuse me. Let's start that over again. I'm bringing with me one of my favorite books on the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm sorry for the glare with that. But that's Gettysburg Peach Orchard, and that is by James Hessler and Britt Eisenberg. And given that I have family that have fought In that attack, it's just one place that I've been drawn to, and I'm really excited to be able to have the opportunity to return and bring you folks with me and share that story with you guys. I've done it before, and it was not anywhere near with the understanding I'm bringing tomorrow. And I hope to gosh it's better. I really do, because it feels like the first time you're out there every single time you hit a battlefield and have that more knowledge. So like, I heavily encourage, if you live by one close, or if you're even close to Gettysburg, read up on something, find something new that you haven't learned at the field, and then go really spend more time than just the average touring around the town and seeing all the sights. Go spend time on that spot and tell me you don't have an even deeper connection to that battlefield. Because no one really has the opportunity, unless you've studied the battle, you're very studious about it, to really get that connection by seeing different sites in that amount of time. It's very condensed. But if you spend 2 to 3 hours in the wheat field with some maps, it's going to change your entire outlook on the Battle of Gettysburg and the battlefield itself, and it's going to look a little different both mentally and physically when you go back. Peach Orchard's what did it for me. I thought it was going to be the wheat field, and I thought it would even be Oak Ridge, being that that's where my light bulb moment happened. But it wasn't. It was absolutely, and without a doubt, sitting and realizing many different aspects of the Peach Orchard, from Sickles moving his troops forward towards the Emmitsburg Road on July 2nd, to the Peach Orchard itself, the fight that Barksdale initiates when he launches that evening assault through the Peach Orchard towards the center of the Confederate or the Union line, and the unfortunate happenings of the Sherfy Barn and what happens to the Sherfy family after the war. So all these things, on top of my ancestor being in a battery firing on what is arguably called artillery hell times two. We have the one in Antietam or Sharpsburg in 1862, but now we have this even hellish, more hellish. I don't know the descriptive word for that, but that's what we're looking at there too, is this real nasty fight on the second. And they're a part of that, and they experience that, and they write about it, and we have their stories for that, and that's going to be awesome to share. And a lot of that comes out of this too. This is used great sources, great primary sources. So that'll be with us for sure, and definitely be pulled from. I think that's a great one to use in that situation. Next, just for reference as well, I got to bring Sickles to Gettysburg. It highlights what happens at Hazel Grove, and that's instrumental to his move forward, which we'll talk about. So a lot of that comes from here, and I love the view that they did, and I love the way that they have been able to interpret that. So without a doubt, don't even need to go into that too much farther. That's James Hessler again. I really like James Hessler's work, and I hope they one day go to Gettysburg when I'm up there and maybe bump into him and have a conversation, because, man, that guy has been definitely putting out some material that I'm, top shelf books that I keep very close, because they're just referenced that much. So incredible work, Mr. Hessler. I really appreciate what you do for the Civil War field. And I can't wait to see what more you have to offer us. Next, my friend Doug Ashton has written a biography on William Barksdale that I think is superlative. And I really do think that this book helps to paint a better understanding for many of the battles Barksdale was featured in, and Gettysburg being his last. Obviously, this is something that needed to join the shelf. It also helps that he's very, very productive at the First Battle of Fredericksburg, and there's some things that happened during the Second Battle of Fredericksburg that, again, I have family connections to. So Barksdale's just always in that area, and I've been studying his Mississippians, not in depth, but a lot of their movements, and being able to understand his movements, his ideologies, his history, just making that help me understand some of his decision making. And plus, Ashton writes a fantastic book, so that's going to go with something I don't know if I will have time to do. I really hope I do, but if I don't have the time, it's okay. But William Frastinito's two books too, the photography at Gettysburg. So one's the war photography about all the the carnage and the cleanup of Gettysburg. The other one's just early photography, so park history, photographs, just photographs of the borough itself. And I think that that's going to be incredibly cool to look at, and maybe change another one of those how I view Gettysburg, scenario is going to be one of those where I'm like, wow, I never really thought Baltimore Street would look like this, and look what it looks like today. Those things, those are awesome to have, and to use Frastinito's incredible work on a life changing thing in regards to studying, that's again one of the greatest things I think I could have as a resource, and anyone can have as a resource because it's available. So that's going to come with as well, and I hope really be instrumental in helping understand that a little more. Uh, Obviously, we need some maps because need maps. What I'm going to use tomorrow are Bradley Gottfried's, and then more so, Lino's campaign atlas. This is incredible. I have always, since I have had this, taken it with me when I go to Gettysburg, throwing it open in my bed when I'm reading and trying to understand some of the actions that take place. So it's been incredibly useful in that regard. And I mean, I can't stress enough. If you're a Gettysburg aficionado, if you're a studious, studying, hardcore, traveling, advent, Civil War buff, I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to say it anyways, and specifically on Gettysburg, then you cannot find any reason not to have this on your shelf or use this in any way, shape, or form when you're on that field. Absolutely worth it. And light load this time around. Last one's going to actually be recently published. From Arlington to Appomattox, Lee's Civil War Day by Day. Even though it's only a few quotes. It's better to understand the campaign as a whole, and I want to hear it from the happenings of Lee. Charlie Knight did a fantastic job with that too. Can't stress enough, if you are into the Civil War, this is not just if you like Lee, if you don't like Lee, it's nothing like that. This is important to have for the history. Folks, if you guys have joined tonight, I appreciate it. I know it's late. I'm sorry for the 2 late streams. Working the new job, it's very irregular, but the times that I am able to, I'm beyond thankful to be able to be on here. And I really look forward to bringing you content from the field for once, and then having some more of these talks. And the way that the live streaming, the brand is growing. Unfiltered Historian is pretty cool. I'm really excited that it has changed to this. And I do really still want to focus on some games here and there. I mentioned last night that's not going to be the focus on this anymore. It's not, but there are times where I will have that. So I don't want to have everybody thinking that I quit that. It's not. We're still going to play on Twitch. This is still broadcasted to Twitch right now, but Twitch itself, when I broadcast out of there, will be game strictly. With that said, though, again, check in tomorrow. I have not given a time for a reason. Because if you follow the Mr. Ocolio page, or if you are on my personal Facebook page, you will see when we go live. It'll be a surprise where we're at and what's going on. I don't want to narrate anything. I just want to boom, surprise, boom. If you're on Twitch, you will get a notification. YouTube, notification. And if you can't catch it tomorrow, it's okay. All the videos will be up. Guys, this is the first 150th or first anniversary I get to spend in Gettysburg. I'm beyond excited for that. I'm beyond excited for what this brand has to offer and what you all have to teach me as well. I can't thank you guys enough for joining me tonight. If you've joined, if you've watched from the comfort of your armchair home next day, thank you. It's the 158th. Let's remember that battle. Let's remember those people, just like we would any other battle anniversary, but 158th is cool. I did this for Chancellorsville too. Chancellorsville means the same, just as Gettysburg does. I don't want anyone to get any idea that I'm favoriting one or the other. I wish I had a mecca like Chancellorsville, but I'm also glad that there's no big village or town set up by it, because there wasn't one. I don't want to ruin that. Gettysburg just had it, just like Fredericksburg does. All these places will be brought to you guys live into your living rooms or your TVs or your computers, and I can't wait. Y'all have a wonderful weekend if I don't see you on this stream. I look forward to seeing every single one of you again soon.